happiness is not just a momentary emotion. It is an ongoing, deep state of well-being. So just giving up on happiness, that's a mistake.
Maybe there's a curse that you will never be happy. You'll be extraordinary, but you're never going to be happy.
So when you talk about happiness, you need to look at happiness at 3 levels. The first level is
Professor Tal Ben-Shahar. People stand in line to get into his lectures. People buy his books, bestsellers, numerous of them. It is impossible to get his Harvard course. And today you get a chance to actually listen to him and have a one-on-one deep conversation about happiness. What makes one happy? How do you pursue happiness in your own life, in your business? How can you make others, whether it's your family or your business workers, happier? And what's the impact of being happy on your productivity? Listen to this one. It's quite extraordinary. Hi, Tal. Should I call you Professor Ben-Shahar? I think it'll be a much more casual conversation, but I got to tell you that I've been following your material and for many, many years, and I really want to thank you for being here. It's quite extraordinary. So thank you for being here. So a simple but a big maybe question to start with is why is happiness important?
Yeah. So happiness is important, has been important since time immemorial for 2 main reasons. One reason is because it's in our nature to want to be happy. We want to be happy. We want the people we care about to be happy. It's an innate, instinctual need. But there is another reason why happiness is important, an indirect one, and that is that when we increase levels of happiness, many other good things happen. For example, in the context of leadership, management, you increase levels of well-being in yourself, in your employees, creativity and innovation go up significantly. You increase levels of happiness even by a little bit. Engagement, motivation increases. The organization is more successful. Individuals are more successful. In schools, children become more creative, more productive. Their grades improve as a result of happiness. Not only that, teamwork, relationships in general improve. Longevity goes up. So there are all these benefits to increasing levels of happiness beyond the fact that it feels good to feel good.
That's great. There's a whole world there which we're going to dive into. But I want to actually start with a personal level. Why happiness for you? Walk us through the journey. Like, what did you just wake up one day and say, I want to be happy, I want to study it? I mean, I know you went to Harvard, then Columbia U Center, et cetera. But tell me about a little bit of your journey. How did you find it, et cetera?
Yes, so in a nutshell, I became interested in happiness because of my own unhappiness. So growing up, I've always been a hard worker. I was a top athlete, a top student. Checked the boxes, got into the top schools, great jobs. So I checked the boxes except for one box, and that is the happiness box. I was actually quite miserable. Today, after having studied psychology, I don't think I've ever been depressed or clinically anxious, but I was not happy, sad, stressed most of the time. And it really didn't make sense to me because I kept on thinking, all right, when I get this or achieve this or win this, then I'll be happy. And it turned out to be true. I was happy when I won a squash tournament, when I played squash, or when I got into Harvard, or when I, got a dream job. I was happy for a few hours or days or maybe a month, but then very quickly I reverted back to my base level of well-being, which wasn't high. So at some point,
go ahead.
At some
please.
point, Boz, I realized that it's not about the external achievements. It's about my internal perception of reality. And that needed to change. And then I understood that I needed to study the internal. And for me, that meant and still means psychology.
Yeah. So there's something I'm missing here because Is from your perspective and your deep understanding, is happiness a state of mind that is ongoingly, or it's moments? Because I think most of us, I can tell you about me, is that there's a moment, like you said, like you get an accomplishment, or there's more you with your kids or with your family, or just having fun at a party. There's a moment of happiness. Are you saying that happiness is more of a state of mind than actually moments of a spurt of happiness?
Yes, of course, each to his or her own in terms of how we define happiness. The way I define it is that it's much more than just a momentary high. For me, a momentary high, I went to the beach, I was happy. Well, that's not really happiness. That's pleasure, or I would define it as maybe, joy. But for me, happiness, I go back to the ancient Greek, specifically Aristotle, who saw happiness more as a deep sense of meaning, a deep sense of accomplishment, which means that a happy life also includes sadness and struggles, as long as it is meaningful, connected to other people and such. So happiness is not just a momentary emotion. It is an ongoing, deep state of well-being.
And explain to me the difference between satisfaction and happiness from your perspective.
Yeah. So, I can be satisfied after, I complete a project for work. Does that make me happy, or can I say that I'm living a happy life? No. However, if I am doing work in general that is meaningful to me, if I'm leading a life where I have a close, intimate, meaningful relationships, well, then that gets a lot closer to the way I define happiness. Helen Keller, over 100 years ago, said that to her, happiness is wholeness. W. H. Happiness is wholeness. Yeah. And drawing on that definition, I see happiness as whole person well-being. In other words, it's the well-being of the different elements of being human. And what are those? Those are spiritual well-being. Spiritual well-being is about a sense of meaning and purpose. It's about being mindful and present. So that's spiritual well-being. The second element is physical well-being. That's about exercise and nutrition and the mind-body connection in general, and about rest and recovery. The third element would be intellectual well-being. Intellectual well-being is about learning, curiosity, about engagement, whether it's with text or whether it's with a challenge at work or whether it's with nature or a work of art. So that's intellectual well-being, being lifelong learners. The next element is relational well-being. Relationships are the number one predictor of happiness. Quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us, whether it's colleagues at work, whether it's our families. Relational well-being is about kindness and generosity. And finally, emotional well-being. Emotional well-being, that's about learning to deal with painful emotions, sadness, anxiety, frustration, anger. And it's also about cultivating pleasurable emotions like joy and fun and excitement and so on. So these 5 elements, spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional, that make up the acronym SPIRE. Spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional. These make up the whole person. And happiness comprises these 5 elements. Once again, I define it, because different people.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it makes sense, and I really want to dive. I want to look at a specific example. But before that, I got to share with you my struggle with what you're saying, and it's not an argument because you're an expert. I'm not, but I met and I work with numerous very successful people. Where it could be. I mean, I went to You probably know Tal Ben-Shahar, which is a school of arts, which is extraordinary. And I went to like all those things. And the real, again, in my subjective experience, the real successful people had this hunger in them. They were never satisfied. It was ever, whether it's in business, it's the next acquisition, it's the next, going public and like this, all that stuff, right? It's when it comes to money, when it comes to art, I want to get better, I want to perform better. It comes to sports. So help me work out this struggle, because it seems to me there was a moment when I thought, if you're up to being extraordinary, out of the ordinary, maybe there's a curse that you will never be happy. You'll be extraordinary, but you're never going to be happy. So help me with that struggle.
There is a quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald, who said that the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Now, what are these two opposed ideas when it comes to success? The two opposed ideas, or when it comes to bridging success and happiness, it's the ability on the one hand to be dissatisfied and want more and be hungry, and at the same time to appreciate what you have. So, again, I'll give you an example. I can be very happy with a book that I wrote and be very proud of it and still want more. I'll give you a real example. I have a wonderful wife whom I love dearly, and we have a great relationship, and I hope our relationship will become even better 5 years from now. So the fact that you can appreciate and be satisfied with something does not mean that you don't want to improve it. And this is where happiness and success meet. Because if there is only dissatisfaction, there are many very successful people who are miserable.
Yeah.
At the same time, there are also many very happy people who are not very successful by conventional standards. They haven't, checked, the boxes that we in society deem essential for success. And they're fine with it. At the same time, there are also people who have both, who continue to grow and learn and improve, and at the same time also lead a happy life. Now, a happy life doesn't mean a perfectly happy life. A happy life means a life with ups and downs, but where they feel a sense of fulfillment and accomplishment, and they're generous and they're kind and they're successful.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds to me that there's a context. Context is more of happiness is more of a context, and then there's a content, the act. So the action that you're still going to be. One can be hungry or driven or wants to accomplish better and better and better. But if the background of this whole world is happiness, then one operates in a more holistic way. Is that?
Yes, and because it's not just the context, it's very much the content, because it depends on what I want to be better. So for instance, if I want to be better and it's only so that I can get, more accolades and prestige, and so that more people, clap for me and that I get more likes on social media, that's not the path to happiness. But if I want to be more successful in terms of how many people I impact or how deeply I impact whether it's my listeners or readers or coachees or children, then that is the path to happiness. So the content has to be meaningful in order for me to lead a happy life, not just the backdrop and the context.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to go to level. I want to first of all talk about the leaders who are with us, and then I want to talk about the people who work for them and are climbing up the, let's say, corporate ladder or business ladder. But let's talk about the leaders. It's again, I'm simplifying what you're saying, and please forgive me for doing that. But it sounds to me that the holistic life, the example you gave, is critical for all those 5 elements that are critical for accomplishing happiness. And then you meet someone who's in their early 30s and they're running or late 20s and they're starting a business and they work many, many hours. They don't sleep enough. And they say, yes, yes, I know, Tal, that I should, meditate and I should eat healthy and I should, work out. And so the two reaction might be is one is I get it, but I'm too busy right now. The immediate thing, I have to raise money. I have to make sure that the lights are still on. I have to sell my product, whatever it is. So how do you deal with that? That's the first element to it. The second thing is, I think there's an element of saying, yes, I will get to this and then I'll be happy. Like not as a result, but I'm saying when I get to a particular level of success, I'll be able to slow down a little bit and meditate and work out and all that stuff. So how do you deal with that challenge?
Yeah. So both are challenging. And let me respond to the first question. I'm busy, I don't have time, from the opposite side, not from the side of the successful or aspiring entrepreneur who's in, her late 20s or early 30s, but rather from the person who is struggling with 3 jobs just to bring food to the table for her children. Because in a sense, they are facing a similar obstacle, and that is that they either objectively or subjectively, and it doesn't matter because that is how they lead their lives, they don't have time for finding a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives and for all these 5 beautiful elements of Spire. And many people say to me, the theory of happiness is only for the select few. Again, only for the select few who have already made it and have time.
It's like a privilege.
It's a privilege.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. Why? Because pursuing happiness is not an either-or proposition. Meaning it's not either you pursue it fully or, you postpone it until you can. Far from it. So let's take the extreme example of that, mother who has 3 jobs just to get food on the table. She can't find work that is meaningful to her. She has tried. And what does she do? She continues to do what she does, and then she finds an hour or 2, once, twice a week, where she does do something that is meaningful to her. Whether it's, spending time with her friends, or if she can, volunteering somewhere, or going out with her kids. And during those 1 or 2 hours, if she experiences meaning, the impact is not just on the time that she's doing it, but it's also the lead time and the time after that is painted with the hue of meaning. In other words, there is a trickle effect to these small events throughout her life. So just giving up on happiness, that's a mistake. Why? Because happiness is not a 0-1 proposition. You can become happier, even if it's by a little bit, by doing certain things that conform to the Spire elements. The same with a 29-year-old who's very successful. If they work hard, and that's fine, and been there, done that, and to a great extent still doing it. If they can find, whether it's at the end of the week or twice during the week, breaks, times when they're doing things that are very meaningful to them, if the rest of the work is not meaningful, which it may be, then those 2 hours can contribute a great deal. It's the same in terms of, ideally, you want to be in the gym or exercising 5 times a week. Certainly entrepreneurs who are under a lot of pressure, stress, want to do that. But let's say you don't have time to spend 90 minutes in the gym and then going to yoga class, which is also great when you are an aspiring entrepreneur. That's okay. It's not an all or nothing proposition. So go, 3 times a week for 30 minutes each time. Let me take it even more to the extreme. This is something that I've been working on recently. So you're familiar with the concept of an MVP, not from sports, from business. So an MVP, a minimal viable product. So I came up with the idea of an MVI. MVI is a minimum viable intervention. What's a minimum viable intervention? It's the shortest form of practice intervention that still makes a significant difference when consistently applied. So yes, going to the gym for 90 minutes, great. In fact, perfect. However, even if you take 3 times during the day, 1 minute, 1 minute, that's a minimum viable intervention where you jump up and down on the spot or climb up and down the stairs, and get your pulse up. And then maybe twice more, once to do one set of push-ups and, maybe one set of chin-ups. That's it. Total of 5 minutes. You don't even break a sweat when you do that. That's a minimum viable intervention that goes a long way, not as far as a 90-minute session 5 times a week. But if you do that 5 times a week, you're doing a lot towards contributing to your happiness, just like the single mom is doing a lot by spending that 1 hour a week doing something that is meaningful to her.
Yeah. So I totally get the MVI part. And my thought is, or my question to you is, you shared earlier 5 pillars, or the maybe a better word
Elements.
you have, 2 elements, thank you, elements of providing happiness, providing the path of happiness. Or when I have a minimal time, is the one from your research, from your academic work, is the one that is more impactful, maybe not more meaningful, but more impactful? Is it, if I have half an hour, do I meditate? Do I create happiness and intimacy with people? Do I work out? What, or they're all have to elevate, kind of like the boats all rises at the same time? So,
look, some of all of them, or a little bit of all of them, is important. For instance, you may, exercise for an Ironman and find deep meaning in your work, and yet live like a hermit. Probably for most people, that would mean unhappiness in the long term. Again, not all, but most. Or let's say, you have an amazing relationship and you spend quality time with your family and friends, and, work is going great, and you live a life of a couch potato. That's probably not a prescription for, well, certainly not for health, but also not for happiness. So we need all of them, all 5, to some degree. And that's the beauty of the MVIs. They can introduce the 5 in very low, small quantities, and still maintain, maybe not enhance, but maintain a nice level of overall.
it's like microdosing of happiness.
It's exactly that. It's a microdosing of happiness. And at the same time, you want to think about, and this is not about, there's no generalization here. This is very personal. You want to think about which of the 5 elements is most important for you now. Because, now in my 50s, it's different than it was in my 20s. And, it will probably be different if I live to be, 90. So you need to ask which are the most important, which are the ones that I want to invest in more. It depends on, are the kids at home or are they away? Is it the beginning of a relationship? Is it more, are we sustaining is it the beginning of a business? Or is it already up and running? So these things change, and we need to be, self-awareness is not just important for great leadership. It's also important for happiness.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's trickle it down further. Okay. So now, from your statement in the beginning, it's very clear, and I think most of us have experienced it, that the happier staff or happier team operates better, elevates the performance, et cetera, right? So, but there's a natural conflict in a business, because you're the boss many times, or one is the boss if you're working for someone, and they see things differently, and she might decide you got to go that route, and you think that you should go this route, et cetera, from a business perspective or from a personal perspective. And so how do you find the balance, knowing that you, as a team, committed to providing happiness and creating an atmosphere of happiness, at the same time having constant conflict because people have different point of views, and sometimes your boss or your investor or whatever it is, someone who's on the board, wants something different than yours?
Yeah. Look, the role of the CEO is not to make people happy. It's to run a successful organization. Now, how do you do that? Well, there are different ways. One of the ways of doing it is to increase levels of well-being, meaning in an organization, it's a means, not an end. So we know that increasing levels of well-being, helps the organization function better. There is a real high ROI on happiness, and that's the way it should be perceived. Now, if happiness and success, or happiness and performance, were in opposition to one another, then we would have been in trouble. But that's thankfully not the case. Now, that also means that sometimes you have to forego well-being, certainly in the short term. I've been involved in a number of startups, and the beginning wasn't always fun. Big deal. So what? I think one of the I'm thinking more about parenting today than about management. But one of the biggest mistakes that parents make is that when they are obsessed with their children having fun all the time. Again, that's not happiness. Happiness is also struggle, and happiness is also about sometimes experiencing even suffering, and that's okay.
Can you make someone else happy? Or is it something that they have to go through? Because, by the way, you said parents. I think one of the things that parents are very concerned about is my kid happy. And how much of a responsibility do we have to make our kids, and I'm talking about the very, very young kids, but maybe teenagers, et cetera, or young adults, can we make them happy, or is it something they have to go through?
Well, we can certainly make them unhappy. And,
yeah, that's easy. That's an easy one.
That's an easy
Yeah.
one. In terms of making them happy, we can create conditions that can help them become happier. One of my professors in business school, Richard Hackman, whose expertise was teams, always talked about, you don't make great teams. You create the conditions for great teams. And it's the same with raising children. We want to create the right conditions. Arguably the greatest educators of all time, Maria Montessori, talked about how do you create that environment for the child where they can thrive and flourish. Dan Ariely talks about it a lot in the context of our homes and our organizations. How can we create an environment that encourages positive behavior? So how do you create that environment? And this is a question that entrepreneurs, managers, not just HR managers, have to ask themselves. What environment do I want in the workplace? For example, I'll give you an example that we're all familiar with. What food do you put on the counter? Do you put chocolate there? Or do you put fruits there? Or do you put both there? In which case you're really putting chocolate there.
Exactly, because no one's going to go for the fruit. And second thing is, I'm assuming that someone understands long-term impact of high level of sugars. It maybe give them a satisfaction for a very short period of time. There'll be a crash after that. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is one example of an environment. Another example of the environment you create, the conditions that you as a manager create, is what example do you set for them? For instance, do they see you, or at least do they know that you go to the gym regularly? Or do they see you working straight till 10 p.m. and then, having a nightcap and crashing? That's not being a healthy role model. Certainly not as a parent, but also not as a manager. And if you do, ultimately, what employees or children do is they do what you do more so than what you say. If you're the authority figure, they do what you do more than what you say. And what you want them to do is to be at their best. You cannot sustain peak performance if what you're doing is, working 14-hour days with no breaks and unhealthy food and low levels of sleep.
Okay, so let me just pause on this one for a second. and I'm generalizing it substantially just for the sake of the example. Okay, so I've spent time with Goldman Sachs. For me, that's an example of someone, they take the top of the top. I mean, I know the culture is changing in the last few years, but when I was exposed to Goldman Sachs, it's like you work someone to the bone. They make a lot of money at young age, and most of people will leave. They'll get an experience for 3, 5 years. You'll squeeze as much possible out of the employee. They'll learn a lot. There's a element of like, I've made it because I work for Goldman. But I did not experience as a healthy environment. I experienced as a very demanding, goal-oriented environment. But saying that, I also spent time with not startups, but I would say companies in Silicon Valley, again, to generalize things. And my experience being someone who's based in New York and have that kind of like East Coast mentality is they're not doing much. And I said to myself, if they were not making so much money from their innovation, there's no way they could have been able to maintain it, because everybody were like either by the coffee machine or by the yoga class. Like, who the hell is working at Google? I was blown away when I was at a few other campuses. So, and for me, it's two different cultures.
Yeah.
Okay, so which one is the healthy one? And if you don't mind, address from the employee's perspective and from the other perspective too. So both sides of them, because like you said, the CEO's job is not to make you happy. It's to deliver high returns on the investment, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, look at the market value of Google and Goldman.
Wow, that's a surprising, amazing answer. So you are correlating directly the level of intention and commitment to happiness of the employees to the value of the company?
No, because you also find many very happy companies who go out of business unhappily, and
Yes.
and you find many unhappy companies, employees working very successful companies, and of course, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, the big banks are extremely successful, and I would, if someone is interested in finance, I think and there is a good fit between who they are in these organizations, I would recommend going to these organizations. So I have no problem with it. I think that with very little change, the J.P. Morgans, the Goldman Sachs of the world can increase levels of well-being, and through that increase the productivity, their output of their analysts, as well as of their partners.
So you can have a high pressure, a boiler room kind of industry, but still provide happiness inside the framework.
Because it's not an all or nothing proposition.
Yes.
Because small changes make a big difference when consistently applied. Now, what's also very important, Buzz, is to find a fit between who you are and the organization. Google is there are more people who are attracted to Google than any other company in the world. We know that. They want to work there because they like what they see. They work hard and they play hard. And there are also people who really, really want to work at Goldman or at GE with very different cultures. And that's fine too. The wonderful thing about our world is that you don't have to do what your dad did or mom did. You have a choice, or many people, not all, have a choice. And that's a wonderful thing. Find the right fit for you. Having said that, the organizations that are pushing their, as you put it, squeezing everything out of their employees, continue with a competitive, hardworking environment. Don't give that up. That's part of your DNA. And you can also do better with small changes.
Okay, I have a small question that came to mind. Which are the happiest company you ever worked with or got exposed to?
I don't know. I guess.
And you can plead the fifth on this one. I mean, if you're like, I would love to.
I will do something similar to pleading the fifth.
Yeah.
I don't know if I found the happiest company. I have found very happy people in many companies. So, I've some of my friends who are working at McKinsey absolutely love it.
Wow.
And they, and they're traveling nonstop, and you look at their lives from the outside, and they work hard, being away from, they love it. They love the travel. They love the excitement and the adrenaline. And it's not the right environment for other people. Google, there are people who would quite literally go crazy there. They would think, just like they would go crazy lying on the beach. They're called type A's. So the key is to find the right fit.
Okay, but I'm going to push because, as we know from Harvard, there's case studies, right? So you have experience through your work with Harvard and Columbia and all thing, substantial amount of companies. Which one will be? Let me make it easier for you. Which will be a case study that you say point to a particular culture one succeeded doing that caused the most amount of impact through happiness on the employees and their results?
Yeah. So look, Google is the easy answer, of course. Johnson and Johnson, they have a very strong culture. They connect their employees to their values, which is very important. What Bill George did at Medtronic is more than interesting.
I was surprised. I read, and I hope I'm not wrong, that actually the longest, like the time that employees in the U.S. stays the longest in large companies is actually Coca-Cola, which I was very surprised because when you look at the product, you're like, okay, it's nothing really inspiring. It's not even Pepsi that has all the other elements of food and beverages. So I wonder I don't know if you know them. I don't know anything about Cocoa. We've done a case study on it, but I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something right if they're keeping people longer than any other company in the United States, large companies.
Yes. So I don't know much about Coca-Cola other than the
Yeah,
fact that happiness is one of their core values.
that's true.
They talk
That's the
about
commercials. I didn't know. Yeah,
they
yeah.
had the well-known what was it? Open
Life.
happiness campaign.
Yeah,
Open happiness. Open the
yeah,
bottle.
yeah.
So they really do focus on happiness. How they do
Okay.
it specifically, above my pay grade.
Your next book. So a few more things. Culture-wise, so we all know that there's two part of my questions around it. So first of all, I know that Scandinavia is known as the happiest countries in the world, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, is it a cultural thing? Is it something they actually actively have done? If I build a company in India versus in California versus New York or in Buenos Aires, will I have to deal with the culture around me that impacts the happiness?
Yes. The short answer is yes. Slightly longer is yes, absolutely. Let me elaborate. So when you talk about happiness, you need to look at happiness at three levels. The first level is the universal. The universal level of happiness is about things that are common to all people, all places, all times. For example, we all, whether you are living in New York today or in Kyoto of 1,000 years ago, you need a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, or you need movement, physical exercise. It's part of our constitution. These are universal elements. So that's the universal part of happiness. The 5 spire elements, universal. At the same time, there are also cultural elements, because what's meaningful for the quote unquote typical New Yorker is different than what was meaningful for the typical Kyotan 1,000 years ago or today. So there is the cultural element. And then there is a third aspect to happiness, or a third level, and that is the personal. Again, you have the universal, you have the cultural, and you have the personal, where two people, even raised under the same roof in the same place, will find different things meaningful, or different exercises or types of exercises compelling or helpful. So there is also the personal, and you need to take the three into consideration. This is why, for the third level, the personal, why I emphasized fit. You need to find the right fit of the individual to the organization. At the same time, you have to understand what culture you're working in. I've
Would
lived
you?
I've lived in
Yeah.
numerous countries. I think 7 or 8 countries lived for throughout my life, and every place was very different. Whether it was Singapore or Israel or South Africa or the United States or the UK.
Yeah. Would you recommend sometimes to move a headquarter or a company from one place to the other just because of the cultural context of happiness around there? Is it more difficult? What I'm trying to ask, like, is it more difficult to provide happiness to? And I'm generalizing, but I lived in Russia. And they're not very happy people. I mean, they're having fun, but they're not. They're very dark, in many moments. Is it better to start a company in India where there's a fundamental experience from what I see and I experience of even very poor people, just there's a sense of satisfaction and happiness there, or it doesn't really matter, you can fight against it?
So if I had the choice and the privilege of starting a company anywhere, I would not look at happiness. I would look at different elements. For example, the culture in its and the context around it. I mean, why do so many people want to create a company in the U.S. despite the high taxation and the bureaucracy compared to?
Is it because of talent available? Maybe
It's
talent, maybe the
mostly because of
schools
the
we go.
context, because you can trust the system. Again, not perfect,
Yes.
but you can trust the
Yeah.
system. Another element that I would look at is the approach to work. I mean, is it as a culture? Is it highly disciplined? Why do would companies or many companies certainly in the past wanted to do things in Japan? And again, these are overgeneralizations because in every place you
Yes.
could find,
Of course. But yeah, but the reality is there's very little market of startups in France because the culture doesn't call for entrepreneurships. Like entrepreneurship, like I totally get it. But the question is, when one looks at, let's say, global expansion, should happiness be part of the criteria when they choose a place?
So, Boaz, I didn't think about this in depth, and I need to think about it. I think it's a great question. So I will take the fifth on that instead of guessing. But wherever you open a place, you can increase levels of happiness. Whether it is in Finland or Russia or Germany or Singapore or Costa
So
Rica,
it's in,
which is
yeah, exactly.
one
So
of the
it's in relationship, which is very happy, exactly.
yeah.
But it's in relationship to where you are, right? So even whether you're in Costa Rica or you're in Scandinavia, which I don't know how they're happy. There's so many little hours of light, in the winter there, but they're succeeding it. You're saying regardless it's a true commitment to a manager in a company to develop happiness among their people.
Good,
Yeah.
exactly. And you have to realize that the way you would do it is very different. So I do a lot of work in France, and the way I talk about happiness in France is different to the way I talk about happiness in the United States. In France, again, I'm generalizing, but in general, they want the data. They don't want, what they call American self-help stuff. They want serious. If you bring them the data, the research, then it's interesting. By the way, similarly in Germany, they're much more, or similarly also in different cultures. Am I speaking to yoga teachers or am I speaking to engineers? You need to take culture into consideration. Yes, there is the universal. Everyone wants to be happy, even when you're, whether you're in Russia or whether you are in Costa Rica. We all want to be happier. There are universals. We all need a sense of meaning and purpose. We all need to move. We all need relationships. How you communicate that need and how you help them attain higher levels of happiness, very different in different cultures.
Yeah. Here's what I hear in what you're saying. Look, the example, and we both, you and I grew up in Israel. Israel after October 7th have gone through a major, when I visit, I think, again, I'm not an expert, but everybody's depressed. Doesn't matter where you are politically. It's a very difficult times. But people have a lot of people I meet have a meaning, they're a meaningful cause, and that provides something, right? So it seems to me that on a personal level, finding a meaningful element at your work, at your career, at your whatever makes you happy is as important as the cultural of happiness around you. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, though the culture can also be a culture that seeks meaning. It can also be a culture that supports finding meaning. And Israel is exactly that. Even after October 7th, Israel is still among the happiest countries in the world. And
Yeah.
you would ask yourself, how is that even possible? And the answer, well, there are two answers. One answer is because of a sense of meaning and purpose that people find, and by the way, also find unfortunately, in the war, because the feeling in Israel is that we're fighting for our lives, for our
It's
children's
a
future.
meaningful, yeah.
And in 1910, I believe, 1914 maybe, William James published a paper, and
Who's William James?
William James,
Educate
the
us.
father of North American psychology. He was a professor at Harvard, and the building at Harvard, the psychology building, is called
Oh, okay,
after
okay, yes,
William James
okay.
Hall.
Yeah.
So William James in 1949 gave a lecture, I think it was at Stanford, which was about the moral equivalence of war. He says, look, war is a terrible thing. Innocent people die, people are hurt. It saps, energy and resources. It's a terrible thing. At the same time, during war, more often than not, people find a sense of meaning and purpose. During war, people feel very close and committed to one another, to one's group. And he says, can we find the moral equivalent? We don't want to create wars, but can we find a place, a space, experiences in our world that generate this sense of meaning and purpose, that bring people together and create intimate, close, supportive relationships without the element of war?
The price of war, exactly. And I think what he said, but what we're talking about, many people point to it at the fact that younger people now have not dealt with a real, true crisis for like a war, like a world war or something like that for 70 or 80 years now. So you can see more depression. You can see more because maybe there's not enough causes, there's not enough meaningless. And I think with social media, it gets even worse because social media is all about looking out there, and there's this illusion that be created on social media that is what happiness is.
That's right. That's right. And I just want to return to the case of Israel. The reason why levels of happiness, again, not joy, not fun. You go to Israel and you feel, the weight of the current situation everywhere. But the reason why, in the deep sense of the world, the Israelis are still relatively happy is because of relationships. I mentioned earlier, number one predictor of happiness, quality time you spend with people you care about and who care about you. And that's important also in organizations. People often say, well, we don't want, close, intimate, supportive relationships in the workplace. There are certain relationships you don't want to have in the workplace. But in terms of friendships, in terms of being supportive, in terms of having intimate conversations, that's very important in a workplace. It's actually one of the best antidotes for dealing with a burnout and two turnover in organizations.
So you probably are calling for people to go back to the office.
calling-
I'm guessing, but what you're saying that you realize that it's a critical part of teamwork, happiness is that camaraderie, that connection, that chat next to the coffee machine, and not just working virtually.
I think hybrid can work very well, but not being in the office, that's a problem. There is no substitute
Yeah.
for playing in the same sandbox physically.
Okay. So two last things, and Tal, again, thank you. One is there's something I try to speak with on every person we interviewed, and we speak with people from different things in different worlds. The thing that I'm fascinated by and complex is AI. And how does AI fit, doesn't fit? How do you see the next 5 years? Well, let me ask you a very specific question. How does the change that AI is bringing in the next 3 to 5 years, because we don't know, I don't think we can guess further more than that, will impact the element of happiness in the world or in the workplace?
Let me just quickly ask chat and I'll get back to you in a minute. So I think we're in trouble with AI. And because, I heard, I think it was on Jimmy Fallon that Bill Gates was interviewed about his latest book. And he said, what AI is doing is making brain power cheap, inexpensive. And the example he gave, just like computing power was once very expensive, and then he was part of the revolution that made it accessible and inexpensive. And I will take it a step further, and it's just like the Industrial Revolution made physical power inexpensive. So now brain power is becoming inexpensive. And the question is, where does this leave us? Especially given the fact that with the Industrial Revolution, we had since 1770, we had hundreds of years to get used to it, to learn new professions and to ascertain what is necessary and essential and how can we survive and thrive. We don't have 250 years to adjust. Things are changing literally by the nanosecond.
Yes.
So I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't think anyone really knows. I think we're in for a real roller coaster ride. Here is what I'm concerned about. My first book, Happier, took me 10 years to write, cost me blood, sweat, and tears, and a great deal of meaning and purpose. Today, I could ask one of the AIs to write a 250-page book on happiness, drawing on research by Marty Seligman and Sonia Lubomirsky, draw on the philosophy of Aristotle and Lao Tzu. And I would give a list of names. Also, if I haven't mentioned anyone worth using, please feel free to do so. And really, do you mind writing it in the voice of Scott Fitzgerald? Because I love his writing. A few minutes later, I'd have a very good book. Very good book today. 6 months from now, the way things are progressing, an excellent book, probably better than
it doubles its intelligence right now. I just read that it's about 80 points IQ right now, but it doubles every 6 months. So, and we don't know how in a year and a half it's going to be 320. We don't know how it's going to even 360. We don't even know how to interact with something that's so intelligent.
So it's going to do that. And that's wonderful because people will have a much better book than Happier to read. But here is the problem. Where would that leave me? Because where would I be without those 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears? Now, I'm saying me, I'm just one person, but that applies to every person on earth because we could outsource effort. And what would that mean for our personal development and growth? What would it mean? I mean, we already know, and John Haidt has spoken about it. When children are not put under stress and pressure, when they don't struggle, they don't grow like muscles. You go to the gym and all the weights are on zero, you won't grow stronger. We need resistance in order to grow. And we need also struggle, whether it's intellectual struggle, whether it's emotional struggle, whether it's interpersonal struggle, each one of the SPIRE elements. We need struggle in order to grow. And AI is threatening to take that away, just like the Industrial Revolution threatened, and in some cases, fulfilled its threat to take away physical work and struggle. And it made too many people in the world sedentary, unhealthy.
Well, I wanna end on a more optimistic notion, but it's a true struggle. And at least you and I and our audience is doing the intellectual debating and conversation. I'm really worried about the laziness that AI will naturally give us. So we don't have to, we won't have those 10 years to, like you said, work hard on something. But so I love the idea of MVI. If when someone gets off this hour conversation, what's the 3 basic stuff they should start right away do in the pursuit of happiness?
All right. So let's go MVIs, because these are accessible, easy to implement. Every 90 minutes, get up and do something physical. It could be walking up and down the stairs for 45 seconds. It could be doing jumping jacks. It could be doing, your push-ups or have dumbbells, next to you. Do some work, some movement. This will not just make you physically healthier, it will also make you cognitively sharper. So that's one thing. Second, find times during the day when you are off technology. During those times, you can, write in your journal with a pen and paper, or even better, spend quality time with people you care about and who care about you. Don't go on dates or go to a meal and be on the phone. And also, don't go to sleep when the phone is next to you. If you use it as an alarm clock, invest in an alarm clock. You can get good ones for $3. It's worth it. So that's the second thing. Create technology-free zones throughout the day when you can really focus on the relationship with yourself and relationship with others. And the third, I would find times during the day to do some mindfulness practice. Now, people hear mindfulness, they immediately think, oh, I have to sit, with legs crossed and, and focus on my navel. No, find mindfulness practice that works for you. It could be listening to your favorite music with your eyes closed, focused. It could be engaging in prayer with your focused on what you're doing. It could be going to a yoga class. Whatever works for you, but find, even if it's a few minutes, if you can go to an hour yoga class, fantastic. If you do it and you sit for 5 minutes, that's amazing too. And MVI works really well. And Boaz, can I give a fourth one? Is that okay?
Please, absolutely, right. Absolutely. I just have to stand up and stretch because we're going to be at 90 minutes, but no, we have plenty of time. Yeah, please.
Yes, I know you only paid for 3, but I'm giving one for free here.
Free, exactly. And if you call the next 5 minutes, you're going to get a fourth one for free. Yeah, yeah.
So the fourth one would be remember to appreciate. This is so important for all of us, certainly for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it shows up in your books. It's one of the practices you really preach. Yeah. So what do you mean? So tell us, because what is MVI of appreciation?
Yeah. So an MVI of an appreciation would be comes the end of the day. Take out your notebook and write down 3 things that you're grateful for. 3 good things that happened during the day. It could be, a great meal that you had with a friend. It could be, the sun that was out, or the gym workout, or whatever. It doesn't matter. And by the way, it can be the same thing or same things every day. And if you write 7 things down rather than 3, amazing.
Great. Yeah. I just to your MVI, so I have a practice that is different. Please correct me if that's so I practice appreciation for others. So I make sure to acknowledge the barista I get coffee from, or like 3 times a day. I want to make sure that I bring some light into someone else's life, because so is that the same thing, or is a different MVI? Appreciation has to be internally, or it has to be something that with an external person?
That's another practice which works. and works very well.
Okay.
There's a wonderful book.
So we got a fifth one. Perfect.
Wow. I mean, we're
Yeah.
really going wild
Yeah.
here. There is a
Yeah.
wonderful
Yeah.
book by A.J. Jacobs called Thanks 1,000. And what A.J. Jacobs did was he simply asked, who are the people that I need to thank for my cup of coffee in the morning? So he would often write in a coffee shop, who do I have to thank for this? So obviously it's the person who's serving it, but it's also the person who made it. And it's also the person who brought the coffee beans to the store, and the people who grew it, and the people who in the field, and the people who watered. And there
Wow.
are so many. He found 1,000 people he has to thank for a cup of coffee. Taking time to express gratitude to others, to ourselves, to the world, if you believe in a higher being, to God, goes a long way in not just increasing our levels of happiness. Now, this is interesting. It also helps us become kinder, physically healthier. Research by Robert Emmons and Mike McCullough, UC Davis, shows that our immune system strengthens when we express gratitude, and it also contributes to success. My favorite word in English is the word appreciate, because it has two meanings. The first meaning of the word appreciate is to say thank you for something, to express gratitude. And that's a nice, just about every religion, every philosophical system has gratitude, appreciation at its core. It's moral, it's virtuous. Cicero called gratitude the mother of all virtues. So that's the first meaning of the word appreciate. The second meaning of the word appreciate is to grow in value. Money in the bank appreciates.
Yeah.
The economy in good times appreciates. And the two meanings of the word appreciate are intimately connected. How? Because when you appreciate the good appreciates.
Yeah.
When you appreciate the good in your life, you get more of it. When you don't appreciate the good, when you take it for granted, it depreciates. You have less of it. So appreciation is the fourth and fifth and sixth.
Exactly. Amazing. Tal, I know you're an ocean of knowledge, and I really enjoyed your books over the years. So thank you. I really appreciate everything you provided us, and I'm very happy that we spoke. And I'm not just tongue in cheek, but I'm really is. So thank you for all the work you're doing, and thank for providing leadership and being at the edge of what's possible for humans until AI maybe takes it away from us.
Or augments it and appreciates it.
Exactly, right. Tal, thank you very, very, very much. Pleasure having you. Playbook. I have a friend. He is a negative person, and he is a dear friend of mine. And I want to talk about him today. When one puts together a project, whether it's a business or a task or some big goal, we are hungry for positive reinforcement. We really want someone who's going to say to us, or people who are going to say to us, come on, you can do it, you can make it happen. But each and every one of us gotta have someone in their life that is just negative. And when I say negative, I mean something very, very specific. I'm not talking about someone who's just gonna dismiss something you're saying, but someone who think from the empty part of the glass. Someone who doesn't see opportunities, but actually wants to really challenge you, because when you have a great idea, even though it's a little shaky, it's in the beginning of something, you want to go to that person who's the negative person in your friends and ask them what they think about it, and listen to them very keenly. And why do you want to listen to them? Because they're going to try from the very negative perspective, the very pessimistic element of thinking, they're going to try to pierce through your idea. They're going to try to pierce and put down your business plan, your concept, your plan. If you pass the test of the negative person in the group, you're going to be so much ready when you meet investors. You're going to find things you didn't think about. So even though as entrepreneurs, we really are hungry for someone who's going to be positive and support us, and we want to create an environment that everybody says, yes, you can do it. keep that negative friend around because they're the one who's going to make you strong in the most difficult moments because you already had a conversation with them that was uncomfortable. This is Playbook.